Miss Levy here. We are here to talk about 1232 rank size rule and primate city rule. This is explaining the distribution of settlement size and city rankings in terms of size throughout a country. So when we talk about the pattern of urban settlements today, a country can only fall under one of these two theories. They can either be rank size rule or they can be primate city rule. They cannot be both. And we'll see why whenever we look at the definition. By definition, they cannot be both. So when we talk about rank size rule, this is when you rank settlements from largest to smallest, then it's producing this regular pattern. And what it looks like is the country's largest settlement is 1 in the population of the largest settlement. So for example, you have the largest settlement, and that's the nth, so that's the largest settlement. Then the second largest settlement will be half the size of the largest. The third largest settlement will be a third the size of the largest. The fourth largest settlement will be a fourth the size of the largest. All the way down until you could get to the 20th largest settlement. That'll be 1/20th the size of the largest. The 200th size settlement theoretically would be 1/200th the size of the largest. All are of the largest settlement. Again, this is a math equation where you have the nth largest settlement equals 1/n the population of the largest. Don't forget that it's of the largest. So if the largest has 12 million people, then the population of the second largest should be half of that 12 million, which would be 6 million. Third largest should be a third the size of that 12 million, which would be 4 million. Fourth largest should be the fourth of the 12 million, which would be 3 million. The sixth largest should be 1/6 of 12 million, which should be 2 million. So again, should produce this regular pattern. And when they do this, and if it's a rank size rule, you'll have a lot more small cities and very much fewer of the large cities. Because once you start to, you can see that that as you begin to go down into the 1,000th largest city and the 2,000th largest city, there'll be a lot more of these, and the gaps between the size of those will be much smaller. So when plotted, this should form a relatively straight line. So again, this is rank size rule. This is where you have the regular pattern. So you have your largest city, then the second one should be 1 over, you have the nth largest, then the next one, it should be 1/n the population of the largest. So largest, second largest should be half that size of the largest. Fifth largest, fifth size of that largest. So really only country in the world that sort of follows the rank size rule is the United States. And again, you're not going to see this as exact, but it will follow sort of this regular pattern. So largest city in the United States is New York City. On this definition, it says it's just over 8 million people. Then Los Angeles is the second largest, so that should be about half the size of the largest, which is the largest 8 million. Then Los Angeles, second largest, should be about half, so that's 4 million. Chicago is the third largest, so that puts us at about 2.8 million. And then you can see that Phoenix down here as the fifth largest, this should be about a fifth the size of the largest. San Diego down here as the 6th and 8th, then that should be about an eighth the size of the largest, which is New York. So again, this is the rank size rule. When we talk about primate city rule, the largest settlement is overwhelmingly more than twice as many people as the second ranking settlement. So it's overwhelmingly more than twice. Not just more than twice, because that would be half the size, so that would be again closer to the rank size. We're talking about overwhelmingly more than twice as many people as the second ranking. So that would mean the second one is much smaller than half the size of it. Primate city is the largest city. What happens is this leads to a poorly developed urban structure, causing a lot of disparity in population size. It has a lot of significance on the social, political, and economic dominance. And that becomes the primate city is the one with the social, political, and economic dominance because it is overwhelmingly more than double the size, twice the size of the next largest size. Many LDCs do not follow rank size because they have primate city. This creates this great urban to rural disparity. You see a lack of development and distribution in the primate city rule. And when a country that has a rank size, and that would be a country that is the highly advanced MDC, this indicates a society that is sufficiently wealthy to distribute goods and services throughout the country. That says at the bottom, distribute goods and services throughout the country. That means you have a lot of wealth, and so you have a lot of distribution of goods and services and wealth throughout your country. Again, rank size rule really is only the United States. Almost all the other countries in the world, mainly because of the size of the country or level of development, they're primate city. So you can see, let's look at some examples. Let's take a look at Mexico. Mexico City, the largest city in Mexico, is 10.6 million people. Second largest is Guadalajara. You can see that it's at 1.8 million. Mexico City is overwhelmingly more than twice as many people as the second largest city. Same with Denmark. Copenhagen has 1 million people. Aarhus has 200,000. Copenhagen has overwhelmingly more than twice as many people as the second largest. UK, London's 8 million. Birmingham's only 2 million. London's overwhelmingly more than twice. And then Thailand, Bangkok is 1.5 million. And the next largest is 250,000. Overwhelmingly more than twice the size of the second largest. So how do the rank size rule and primate city rule, how do they relate to the urban geography of France? Well, let's take a look at the cities. You can see Paris has 11 million people. Lyon is the second largest at 1.6 million. Marseille is the third at 1.5 million. Lille is the fourth at 1.4 million. And so we can see, what do we think? Is this rank size rule or is this primate city? If this were a primate city, then Paris would have to be overwhelmingly more than twice as big as the second largest sized city. If it was a rank size rule, then Paris would be the largest. The second largest would be about half the size of Paris. The third largest would be about a third the size of Paris. The fourth largest would have to be about a fourth the size of Paris. Well, we can determine here that obviously, overwhelmingly, this is the primate city rule. Paris is clearly well over, overwhelmingly more than twice the size of the second largest. So this is primate city rule and does not follow rank size. So France does not comply with rank size rule because there's a poorly developed urban hierarchy, because Paris is clearly the primate city, and it is primate city rule because it is disproportionately larger than the other French cities and is clearly more than overwhelmingly twice the size of the second largest. Let's talk about some positive effects of primate cities on a country's economic development. So great things about this is you see businesses and consumers. They have the advantages of agglomeration of economic activity. Agglomeration means clustering. So because you have this primate city like in Paris, you'll see a lot of the businesses and consumers all clustering in the same city. So this allows for accessibility and availability of consumers and therefore more consumer goods and services. This provides a large market for goods and services. This affords a country, especially one with a smaller population, the ability to offer high-end goods and services, including education, because of this larger threshold population, because you have so many more people living in that primate city. Again, you see this as a especially an advantage in countries that have smaller populations, like a lot of the European countries. You have the advantages of the enhanced flow of information and ideas within your larger population, because so many people live in the primate city. You see flow of information and ideas because they're all clustered together. You see the advantages of a centralized transportation and communication network, because most of that will center upon the primate city, and then even from the regional cities, you'll tend to see that all will converge there in the primate city. This gives a country that is especially smaller population global trade opportunities, because primate cities can compete on a much more global scale. Let's talk about some negative effects of primate cities on countries' economic development. So this can create a lot of problems because you see the unequal distribution of investment in a country that's primate city, because all that investment and tends to go not just private, like from companies and banks, but also the government investment tends to go to that primate city. So it hinders the more national economic development because the other regions and small cities don't get that money. You have unequal economic and resource development throughout the country because, again, it tends to all center in that primate city, and then the other smaller cities are kind of left out because there just isn't enough to go around. You see unequal distribution of wealth or power because it's, again, centralized in this primate city, and then you'll see a lot less of that in the surrounding other regional cities. You see this like in a country like Brazil, where you have Rio and Sao Paulo, and then you have a lot of other smaller cities. So most of the resources and the government funds and businesses and consumers, they all kind of cluster in those two larger cities. And then the other regions, it's much harder for them to develop. So this creates this unequal distribution at the subnational level, which is when you see the term subnational, that means regional within the country. Transportation networks like cars and bikes are mainly within the city, and that prevents equal accessibility to all regions because, again, it's tend to clustering and centralized in that primate city. You see the impact of centrifugal forces, those divisive forces, and difficulties with political cohesion. So that collective attitude on economic development, because you tend to see regional rebellion and calls for independence as these regions tend to feel more left out and alienated and discriminated against. You see a lot of regional brain drain as people within different regions of that country, they move into the primate city so that they can have more access to wealth and access to job opportunities and higher paid jobs and consumer goods. So you tend to see an unequal distribution of education, entrepreneurship opportunities, and also just accessibility because you just don't have as many doctors and other highly skilled people out in these smaller regions because they've all moved to the primate cities. You see a disproportionate effect of disaster in the primate city on the entire country. So, for example, if there was a disaster in London, it would disproportionately affect all of the UK because London is overwhelmingly their largest city. Whereas in the US, if we have an issue in Los Angeles or an issue in New York or an issue in Miami or an issue in Chicago, the rest of the country can carry on because it's not just one primate city and all the economic activity and political power and social influence is all concentrated in one city. It's more equally distributed in the United States because we have we have this more equal distribution of size. You tend to see more negative externalities like unsustainable urban growth, a lot more slums, more environmental impacts that put a burden on the national economy to cope with the problem. Therefore, they can allocate a lot less to the regions and the smaller cities. Again, you look at cities like Mumbai or Delhi in India, you'll see that so many of the people have moved to these major cities, and these are their two largest cities there, that you see this disproportionate amount of influence and government dollars and investment dollars and transportation located in those cities. But also you see so many people have moved there. There just wasn't enough jobs. There wasn't enough housing. So you see a lot more of the slums and real urban issues there. All right, guys, this concludes our presentation about the differences between rank size and primate city. Just keep in mind that a country can only be one of the same at one time. They can either be primate city or they can be rank size because rank size, you follow this regular pattern of the largest city. Then the second largest city should be half the size of the largest. Third should be a third of the size of the largest. And then on in the regular pattern of the nth largest city should be 1 over nth in the largest city. Whereas the primate city will be the largest city, and it'll be overwhelmingly more than twice the size of the second largest city. All right, thank you.